This is the HotFish series from the University of Stirling.
Hello and welcome to the HotFish Podcast series. Today I'm talking to Wesley Malcore, a PhD student who's been working on the Green Aquaculture Intensification in Europe project, or GAIN, which has been funded by the European Union Horizon 2020 programme. One of the things he's been looking at is how seafood is traded globally, particularly through the global seafood shows that are located around the world, and how messages around sustainability are communicated between sellers and buyers. Wesley, that's an interesting way of looking at sustainability. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Thank you for the introduction and happy to share our study findings. We observed seafood trade exhibitor booth messaging strategies in China, which is the largest seafood producer in the world by volume. We also observed trading booths in Europe and the United States. These are considered the major seafood consuming regions in terms of value. More specifically, we observed logo and word use on booths in Brussels, Boston, and also at 3 shows in China, Guangzhou, Qingdao, and Shanghai. European and American seafood traders showed a high interest in sustainability messaging, which is driven by consumer demand for eco-labels and sustainable production practices, while Chinese traders showed a relatively higher interest in messaging around safety and quality. The use of safety messaging can be traced back to concerns around food safety and efforts to address public concerns related to health scandals. The use of quality messaging is strongly associated with signaling about the natural characteristics and health benefits of seafood consumption in the Chinese market.
So these shows really deal with processed products. And of course, that's what we're used to eating by and large in many countries in the West. But that's not the norm elsewhere, right?
The seafood shows deal mainly with processed seafood ready for long distance trade. However, it is important to consider that seafood in a lot of countries is also sold whole and sometimes even alive. In China and some parts of Asia, a large proportion of seafood is still purchased in live form in wet markets, a marketplace in which independent vendors sell fresh food, including vegetables, meat, and fish. Chinese and other Asian vendors at international seafood trade shows may feel obliged to emphasize safety and quality aspects aligned with good health properties, freshness, and natural product characteristics.
So Wesley, do you think that as the purchasing power of people in China and other parts of Asia grows, they tend to have more urban lifestyles, that they then begin to eat more processed, convenient seafood? And if so, what are the implications of that for keeping the environmental impacts of seafood low?
Yes, there are signs of that trend, as urban lifestyles in Asia are also time short, and people often do not have the resources to prepare traditional food. In countries like Thailand, ready-to-eat food, Thai style, is now really popular. Of course, the environmental footprint of this type of food can be very high, as often lots of packaging is used and there is also need for refrigeration. However, if seafood is processed centrally, then the byproducts can be more easily and completely reused at the processing stage. This reduces plate waste at the household or consumer level.
So Wesley, could you explain perhaps how this understanding you built up of how sustainability is messaged, how that might have implications for reducing climate impact of farmed seafood?
Understanding consumer preferences across different socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds is crucial. Messaging strategies could be adjusted and improved to highlight the product's unique selling points and to find a match with the right consumer. For example, emphasizing low environmental impact of the product.
But can the global trade in processed seafood ever be better for the environment than eating fresh, locally produced fish?
This rather depends on how the seafood is being produced. The environmental cost of moving frozen processed seafood around the world is a very small part of the overall environmental impact. Much more important is how the seafood is being produced, either caught or farmed, and for farmed seafood, how was it fed? Of course, some types of seafood, such as bivalves, mussels, clams, oysters, aren't fed at all and these are a really good choice. It's critical to a low environmental footprint that feed ingredients are sustainably sourced and efficiently used. In a recent paper in Nature, I will put a link in the description below, seafood showed generally a lower environmental impact compared to terrestrial livestock.
Well, thanks for that, Wesley. Fascinating what you can find out by visiting different types of seafood shows. And thanks to all our partners on the GAME project who've been great to work with, whether in Europe, China or North America. And lastly, thanks to you for listening. See you next time.
This podcast has been produced at the University of Stirling's Institute of Aquaculture, with financial assistance from the Belmont Forum on Climate and Health. Thank you for listening.